thanks to all our readers. It's quite an array of different voices that we've heard, genre, subjects. Beautiful, love it. We do have a bit of time for questions. So Joanne, I'm looking to you, see if any questions have popped up so far.
None so far.
Okay. I might start then, unless somebody feels inspired. Sue pauses a second for inspiration. All right, well, Nancy, if I can sort of come back to the beginning of the reading, and my mother's hair. I'm struck by the braiding that goes on in that poem, and I think you even refer to braiding at one point. Like there's the hair that comes back and comes back, and then there's this the sun shining through things but not able to shine through things. It comes back and back. It does seem like a very braided poem. Can you talk about why that interests you, the sort of the braiding effect or technique?
Well, I mean, it's interesting coming after the shitty sonnets, right? Because I always think that, I mean, so much poetry is about braiding, right? It's about braiding those sounds that return and images that return. And I guess, yeah, I think that I guess I've always thought that a poem has those kinds of structures that are always interconnecting all the pieces of a poem. And, I in a way, I just got lucky thinking about, the poems was started because a woman that I know showed me the braids of hair of her mother pulled out of a box, and I think that just, it struck me so much, like just that physical object. And it just made a kind of a jumping off point for thinking about my own mother, being a grandmother, time, and then of course how we're braided to the earth, and
Yeah.
how terrible it is. I mean, I live in the Okanagan, and we're always under threat for wildfire here now, every summer, like always, and it just feels that fire is always braiding itself through our summers, the smoke and the trees, and
you can't be oblivious to your braidedness there.
yeah,
these
I mean,
days. Yeah.
you're connected, right? You're
Yeah.
connected in time to other people, to the natural world. And I think poems do that, show that so beautifully, right?
Yeah.
They're such a great way of talking about that feeling of braidedness, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the sun can't shine through things, there is there's distinction as well as braidedness, and that shows up in the poem as well. I guess you don't get a braid if you don't have distinct threads.
Yeah, that's right.
Or hanks of hair or whatever it is.
Sure, and it makes that solid thing, right?
Yeah.
A braid makes that solid thing that you kind of, yeah. I was taking this course on the ecological line with visual artists and poets, and we were talking about the line and strands and threads and weaving, and it was such an inspiring course. And that phrase, things are a gathering, comes from Tim Ingold, who's the eco-philosopher.
I don't know Tim Ingold.
He's a wonderful, I said anthropologist actually, but sort of philosophical anthropologist on the environment. And there's a quote in something he wrote, and it says that the original meaning, the etymology of the word thing is a gathering. That's what a thing is. A thing is something that's all gathered together, which I thought was kind of fascinating. Like I never knew that, and I thought that was wow. What an interesting idea that thingness is a gathering of stuff.
Huh. And then those things also gather.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's almost fractal or something like that.
It is. Yeah, exactly. So you can't talk about the environment, time, anything without that fractaling, I guess.
Yeah, that's cool. I saw something pop up in the chat. Joanne, I'm looking to you.
Yes, because the chat was disabled. It's now enabled, so that's why you haven't been getting any from the chat. But I suggested that people could raise their electronic hands. I don't see any.
For sure.
Let me see if there are any real hands.
Well, you look. I'm going to ask Kirsty the obvious question, I suppose, which is the screenplay life and the fiction life, and similarities, differences, what calls you to one, what calls you to the other?
Oh, I think
Maybe it's not an obvious question, I don't know.
yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
No, I just think in a way, so I started studying screenplay first, and when I went into it, it was natural because I work in the film industry. And when I went to school for it, I thought, wouldn't it be appropriate to get an education in all sorts of writing? Because wouldn't that help? So I went into poetry and was absolutely terrible at it. So respect for anyone who can not only do it, but read it. And it's amazing. But I wanted specifically poetry because I wanted to be able to focus on a single word and get the right one, and not any other word but that one. Because wouldn't I write better screenplays? And then I went into short story for the same reason. I want to be able to condense, in our world, what is 5 acts into, like something that is in 3,000 words, but have all of the right movement and all of the right structure. Wouldn't that make my screenplay better? So from my point of view, it's the same. I can only write the screenplay, and somebody else makes it a visual story later. For me, what makes it strong is that it be a good piece of writing with a good story, structured correctly. That's kind of all I can do. So all of these disciplines were, as far as I'm concerned, I don't know, feed into it.
That seems wise to me.
Mm.
When I dabbled in screenwriting for a short time, took a course, I was very nervous about it, but I was struck by the thinking in images that seemed to come naturally from poetry into screenwriting. I don't know if that's how you approach the screenwriting, but it was wonderful to find that it didn't need to be dialogue driven as I had imagined it, but it could be image driven. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very different in a way. A lot of people are become a little bit more comfortable, I find, with playwriting, as it seems to streamline a little better when you're I don't know. But yeah, for film, I find for me more natural as I'm eidetic, so everything is visual input. And I mean, screenwriting is just more fun because, at least for me, if I'm walking or driving, anything movement oriented will cause the story to be playing out in my head. Then you just have to write it down. But it's kind of the same. I mean, if you're reading a short story, it's playing in your head. You have that beautiful middle ground of what the author was thinking, and then what you actually see, and it's a bit different. So it's kind of the same in my mind. I'm imagining this visual story that no one will ever see but me. What they will see is tamped down. You know what I mean? They will see what a director wants, whereas with the short story, you'll only ever see your version of it. Kind of the biggest difference.
It's all you.
But it's all visual, right? It's all kind of your flowing movie that you're getting when you're listening to the poetry and the short story, and it's all happening.
Well, I guess you can go inside a character's perspective more easily in fiction than you can in screenwriting.
I would like to argue no, only because again, like it's the same thing, right? If I write a story, I have a little cheat where I can say like, well, he was thinking that.
Yeah.
But yeah, in screenplay, it's the same. If I say, okay, like here's all the conflict, now let's see what he does. In a way, whatever he does under all that pressure, or she does under all that pressure, or they do, it's the same thing in a way. I have to express that same thing that you get to write about. So some people see it as a little bit harder. I like it as like, again, you have to think a little bit outside on, what is that terrible pressure they're going to come under, and what are they going to do that will be as revealing as if I just wrote a line that said he was paranoid.
So it's sort of writing the same interior character, but in two different ways.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you just have to see them act it as opposed to think it.
Yeah, great. Loved thinking that.
Grace has their hand up.
I see a hand. Yes.
Yeah.
Bring it, Grace.
Thank you. I have a question for Rachel. So your story was really striking. And I really enjoyed how you approached a topic that is painful and hard to kind of approach, and in some ways taboo, in such a concrete and appropriate way. And I was wondering what your process is for approaching topics like sexual assault, grooming, etc., and how you get yourself in the headspace to write about those. Because I always find that when I sit down to write about topics such as those, I have a hard time approaching them plainly, and that I want to like hide my own feelings and thoughts in my writing from the reader.
For sure. Yeah, I feel like this piece had such a process. It started with a lot of just journaling. So it was just like me just with myself journaling, and then there was kind of this urgency to put it on the page. But I think it actually, like when I started writing it, I wasn't good at writing about, or I don't mean to say I was good at it, but like I was still working through how I wanted to approach this topic. It sat on my computer for many years. So when I finally was kind of able to bring the pieces together, like going to trauma therapy definitely helped. But I actually would listen to drum music when I was working on it. So I would be listening to like a very specific, yeah, I think it was like medicine drum or just like very healing kind of drum music. And that was how I was able to kind of put the piece into a box for myself, that I was able to, you know, listen to that music and visit that place that wasn't a pleasant place. And then with like turning off the music, the drumming music when I was done, and trying to ground myself afterwards. So I think, yeah, the drums really helped when I was putting it all together near the end. But I think giving yourself permission to give yourself space, and yeah, just give yourself permission to take the time that it needs. I think this piece had a 5-year journey. Like it took a really long time. And there was a point when I thought it was ready to come out into the world. And I realized I was actually not ready for it to come out into the world. So again, like I was so grateful for Fiddlehead because it felt like the timing and everything was so in sync. And yeah, I think definitely when you're working on these kind of pieces, it's helpful to have like resources and support. Good. Yeah. So yeah, but just giving yourself permission to take the time that it needs to come out, and having ways to like put it into a container, whether that be music or, you know, doing something, some kind of action or ritual before. And then when you're done working on that piece, that ritual again to help you do that.
Thank
I
you.
found that a very helpful question and answer. Thank you both for that.
Can I just read a quick message from Carlos Morales, and then Nancy has a question. I think that's probably the final question as we come to the end. But Carlos Morales, who is here with us, wanted to say a personal hello to Lena. Glad to hear a fellow poet speaking my mother tongue, Spanish. Carlos is from El Salvador and has been living and writing in New Brunswick since 1991. And now Nancy also has a question for Lena. Would you like to unmute and read it or ask your question?
Sure.
Or would you like me to do
No,
it?
I can ask it. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I love sonnets. I write them a lot myself, or not a lot, but
Yeah.
one time I did. I just wonder, Lena, if you want to talk about what drew you to the form, and you know, did you enjoy charging them up with subject matter that might not be typically expected in sonnets?
Yeah, I mean, I I think it's funny is I actually came to the anti-sonnet more tradition, like and when I say anti, I don't really mean that people are opposed to them, but more like poets like Wanda Coleman or Terrence Hayes, more in the Black American, African American tradition of playing around with the sonnets, in a very loving manner, playing around with the structure, playing around with the language, inserting Black or working class vernacular into the poems, talking about race, racism, sexism, violence, all those things, and inserting them into the sonnet form. So it's funny that I always was aware of sonnets when I was younger, like, oh yeah, okay, Shakespeare, whatever. But again, I and I don't mean that to be, to put down Shakespeare or Shakespearean language. It's just I wasn't educated. And I went to very, very underfunded public schools. And so there wasn't really, we weren't learning about poetry. We were learning about what it meant to be in the workforce and to join the workforce very quickly. So the one thing I will say that kind of unites Carlos's comment is that I also embrace very much this idea of Spanglish. I'm a Chicana, so a lot of times we're not, and it's funny, my father's of Mexican and indigenous origins, but I grew up very Chicano, and my mom is actually from Verdun, so she spoke Franglish growing up. Here I am, I spoke Spanglish growing up, and I also grew up in the hip hop generation, so I wanted to really play around with language, with musicality and all these things, but still embrace the Spanish that I grew up in a loving way. But again, here I am inserting those languages into the British genre, into a very British genre. So that was fun. I had fun playing around with that. And again, also playing around very serious topics that are, to dealing with teenage pregnancy, abortion, refugees running away from Central America. I grew up in the Mission District in the 90s, in the 80s and 90s in San Francisco. And so I also wanted to kind of honor that history of growing up with that community as well. So anyway, I love sonnets. I want to write more, and hopefully they won't be so shitty. Thank you.
Part of me wants to keep asking about the shittiness of the shitty sonnets, but
I mean, I didn't know what else to say, it's like, it's
Yeah.
my first time playing around with a sonnet. So, the teacher said, write a sonnet. I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? So I decided to write one that wasn't really embracing it in a very conservative way, I should say.
kind of takes the pressure off. Like, doesn't have to be
Kind of does. Yeah,
as
for
good as
sure.
Shakespeare or I don't
Or
know,
close to
or
as
like
good as
Shakespeare even.
Hey, as good as Wanda Coleman or Terrence Hayes, I'm cool with that. I think that's a really
Yeah.
cool way to introduce young people to to poetry. It's to say, hey, this is how it's being done now. This is
Mhm.
how the lineage of it.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Folks, we're at a full hour. So that's
Yay.
So thanks everyone for being here. Thanks especially to our readers. I want to thank maybe the readers especially for putting up with like the little moments that just kind of happen because we're on this venue, but I'm so grateful that we could actually come together here. I'm grateful for the readings, grateful for the conversation, grateful for our ASL interpretation, which I always enjoy, herb cut effect. Thanks to Ian, Grace, Aaron, for the work in putting together the issue and the launch. Joanne, thank you always. And a reminder that the fiction contest is open now. Deadline is September 1st. So if you have a story you want to send along for the contest, now's the time. Otherwise, I will wish you well with your day, wherever you may be on Turtle Island. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you.